When events take a turn for the worse, and you are left face to face with someone who intends on taking your life, the way you react can literally save your life. The people in these stories were moments away from having their lives taken and decided to share their stories with others. Enjoy. My husband and I live above our place of business. Our alarm company called us at 3 o'clock in the morning to say there was a motion detect alert. Just one, in a weird place. We assumed it was a mouse, but went to check it out anyway. Husband ends up face to face with a burglar who was on his way out the window he had broken. He ran back inside. I called 911 and we heard mad chaos going on in the depths of the building. So much crashing and smashing. Burglar monkey climbed a 10-foot iron gate, bodily smashed through 2 sets of commercial-grade glass doors, and was outside again. My husband was like, yeah, screw this dude, tore after him, tackled him, got him on the ground, and pinned him. Bear in mind the entire time, I'm narrating this to 911 and chasing them around in my panties and a tank top. I was a bit behind my husband in the middle of the street about 15 feet away when a minivan squealed around the corner. It was this guy's girlfriend in a getaway car. I was super focused on reading the license plate, which is one of those cutesy font out of the state ones, and therefore hard to read, but she yelled, "Get the fuck off him, or I'm running your bitch over." Then she tried to. The audio and video I had watched for the trial was horrifying. I had blocked it out nearly completely, and really didn't remember how close it was. She guns the engine at me. I throw my hands up in front of my face when I realize what she's doing and scream. I jump out of the way with inches to spare. He jumped in and they went off. He had bled all over my husband, but eventually the DNA and the partial plate info nailed them. They're both in prison. Also, trials are terrible. My dad was a meth addict. He did a lot of screwed up things, dropping me off at trap houses to have sleepovers with other coke babies, living in a house full of animal crap and hoarding. He sicked his pit bull on a child. He was a character. One night he came looking for my mom and I at our place. Mom wasn't there. Grandma was babysitting me. I was sleeping in bed when someone started to try and open up my window. It was locked, but they kept jamming something into the bottom to try and force it open. At the same time, I heard the living room door being tried by someone else. My grandma snuck into my room in her nightgown, apparently woken up by the same thing, and told me to say nothing. Don't even whisper. We laid under my bed while a group of men shouted for my mom to come out, slammed their hands on the windows to try and break them, jumped on my grandma's car. She called the police and barely whispered into the phone. Eventually the cops arrived and the men scattered. Long story short, my dad and his other meth head friends had come to the house with guns and knives with every intention to kill me and my mother because she was going to get custody of me. If my mom wasn't so vigilant with locks, we had 3 different kinds on the front and back door, we would have died. My sister had this one friend when we were growing up I always got a bad vibe from. She would try to pick on my little brother and I, but I would always stop her. I was 8. She was 10. Once we were at a lake and all the kids were swimming. I swam out to the deep roped off part, but I was still little and really shouldn't have. She kept acting weird and getting closer to me, making this weird laugh. She pushed me off the wooden pole into the water. I got scared and started to swim back, but she came up behind me and pushed me under the water. It didn't click at first that she was trying to drown me, but after she aggressively pushed me under for the 3rd time, I had this crazy moment of clarity. It was like the world slowed down ever so briefly. I relaxed and let myself sink, swam beneath her, and then I came up behind her. I grabbed her hair and shoved her face into the water, keeping my legs on her back so her body couldn't rise, and I waited until her struggling slowed down and let her come up. I waited in the water saying nothing, bracing myself for her retaliation, but she just looked panicked and swam back to shore. I told my sister, who had already expressed that this girl was weird. We confronted her together, and she just looked really dazed. In a monotone voice, she said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know it would be like that." It wasn't until I replayed those words in my mind later that I realized what she was saying was, "Sorry I tried to drown you. It wasn't until I almost drowned myself that I realized how horrible it was to do to someone else." Wonderful. I was out with a few friends and was with this one girl that had just broken up with a psychopath. We didn't know he was a psychopath. We just found out that night. We were walking back home from a restaurant at 1 o'clock in the morning, and the guy came running out of nowhere. I don't know how he knew where and when to meet us. He ran up to the girl, lifted her shirt up, and stabbed her in the gut, literally splitting her belly open like a fish, and then ran off. This entire thing happened really quickly, so we were all in shock. The girl was holding her own intestines in her hands, and she was so shocked that she didn't even seem scared. Wasn't screaming or anything. She just stood there. We called an ambulance, and they managed to somehow put everything back and sew her up. This happened about 3 years ago, and she still has pretty serious problems with her digestive tract. Can't eat certain things, that kind of stuff. That image of her just standing in the middle of the pathway holding her own guts will remain stuck in my head forever. The guy got 13 years in jail. Now that I think about it, a big part of why they broke up was this constant abuse toward her weight. She wasn't even fat, just a little on the chubby side, and I wouldn't even call that overweight, but he would always tell her that she had a big gut. It was almost an obsession for him. Perhaps that's why he stabbed her in the abdomen as a symbolic action of some sort. I don't know what was going on in his brain, and I honestly don't even care. I grew up in a poor country in South America, and in the city I lived in, we had a lot of slums. Think of stereotypical slums somewhere in Brazil or Colombia. That's what we had. I'm from a middle-class family, so we grew up mostly away from the dangerous areas, but every once in a while, our worlds would intersect. One such instance was during a school trip to a part of the slum that was fighting back against the gangs by trying to create jobs and keep their streets clean from drugs. We went there to study this phenomenon and to help paint some of the houses of the locals as part of the community service initiative. Everything was trouble-free until one of the gangs decided that this was the day they would march into this part of the slum and reassert their dominance. 10 mean-looking dudes just went straight up to the house of the local community leader to give him a chance to change his ways. This apparently upset a lot of the locals who gathered around the house and started getting very agitated. They weren't as well armed as the gangsters, but there were probably 200 or 300 angry people with machetes, pipes, guns, just getting angrier and angrier. Eventually, the gangsters caved in and agreed to leave, but the crowd was out for blood, and they pounced on them and beat the crap out of them and dragged them through the streets. To answer the question of how we escaped a murder attempt, the crowd at this point was running high on emotions and adrenaline, and like a collective hive mind, they decided that our arrival was probably what prompted the gangsters to come to their slum in the first place. So they wanted to teach us a lesson, to never interfere in their business again. Our teacher panically stuffed us all into a small school bus and drove us off as people were coming at us and waving their machetes menacingly in the air. I've read about the phenomenon of crowd mentality before, but largely dismissed it. On that day, I experienced it. It was the single most dangerous and scariest thing I've ever seen. Here were a bunch of largely peaceful people who just wanted to do an honest day's work and not get caught up in gang crap, suddenly turning into violent zombies who wanted to chop off my head. I had a guy high on both meth and acid break into my apartment in college. Somehow he was convinced he lost his glasses inside. I'm doing dishes when my door gets slammed open. Next thing I know, he is behind me, choking me to death in my kitchen. As I was losing consciousness, I grabbed my roommate's acrylic bong and frantically swung it over my shoulder into his face. The bong broke, but did nothing to the guy, and he started choking me even harder. So I swung it again. Because the bong broke the first time, I was hitting the guy with a 6-inch claw of acrylic glass. Afterward, his scalp and part of his cheek were hanging off the side of his face. Essentially, I scalped him with a bong. So I chased the guy out of the house. There's easily 2 foot of snow outside. He tries walking back to his house through a cemetery as a shortcut, and then he passes out in the cemetery. The police only found him because I called the cops and they followed the blood and footprints through the snow. That's the part I was surprised about the most. I hit the guy in his scalp. There isn't much blood in his scalp compared to most of the body, but my kitchen was covered in his blood. His blood was on my refrigerator, counter, floor, ceiling. It was almost as traumatic to clean it. My roommates were gone for winter break. Thank God my roommate's girlfriend came over and helped me. Now as for the guy, the cops couldn't charge him for 2 days because he needed transfusions. He was charged with assault, breaking and entering, and attempted murder. Not sure what he got convicted of, but he did go to jail for 4 years. When I was 2 weeks into my first job as a 16-year-old, we were robbed. It was late, and my coworker's friends had been playing pranks on her all day. So when I saw someone burst through the front door, I thought it was just them. Until, that is, I had something metal pressed against my back and an arm wrapped around my chest. The robber gave the whole stereotypical, "give me all the money" spiel, and ordered us to go into the back room, kneel down, and face the wall. As I was kneeling and hearing him walking toward us, time seemed to slow down. Thankfully, I had been refilling juices whenever he came in, so the door to the back room was partially blocked by a heavy cart. With whatever substance he was on, he couldn't coordinate enough to get past us, so he fled. He was followed by my coworker's husband and caught. When he was caught, they found an industrial-sized pipe wrench wrapped tightly in his fist so that he could get a stronger grip on it when he was swinging it. I'm so glad that cart was there. Once a year or so, I would look him up on the parish prison roster to see if he was still in jail. One year, suddenly, he wasn't. I later found him named in a lawsuit as having stabbed his cellmate a half-dozen times while the guy was asleep. Definitely doesn't seem like the nicest of people. 9 years later, I'm still unpacking this incident in therapy. I don't like walking around cities at night or sitting where I can't see the door. I was exiting a bar once after last call with a friend who was a medic. We saw a girl laying in a snowbank near a telephone pole who had just been hit by a car. We ran over and tried to help her. Some others were already on the phone with 911, and I, not having any medical training, didn't have anything to contribute, but didn't want to just leave. The whole situation was concerning. I turn around for a second and start to hear people screaming. I turn around and a minivan was heading straight for us. The few people around this woman, they already started to run, but it was too late. He hit me as I was trying to flee. put the car in reverse, ran over me again, and then went forward to run over me a third time. Turns out the guy was high and drunk and got into a fight with the woman's boyfriend, whom I bared a strong resemblance to. He thought I was him. Not to throw a pity party for myself, but 9 years later I have a ton of medical issues, and my life pretty much started on a downward spiral since then. But sure, I guess I survived. For anyone wondering about the guy, an off-duty cop watched the whole thing go down, copied his license plate number. He was apprehended 20 minutes later and charged with attempted murder along with many other things. He pleaded out to just 3 years in jail. He actually killed someone else a few years before drunk driving. How they thought that was appropriate is beyond me. I got jumped by 2 grown men when I was a freshman in college. I was walking back from my friend's house and it was about 30 past midnight. One posed as a homeless man asking for $1, and the other had on a security jacket like he worked for the university's safety patrol. When I passed the homeless guy saying I had nothing to give him, I saw the security guy walking toward me. This is when I felt a rear neck chokehold, and the security guy started wailing on me. I had my bag on me, but like I said, I literally had nothing on me. They couldn't take me down to the ground. Surprisingly, I must have had an adrenaline rush. The guy posing as the homeless man said, "Open the backpack. Let's find anything and dip." This lasted about 2 or 3 minutes, but it felt like forever. The entire time I could feel something pointy in my back, but I just like to think it was the guy being extremely excited and that it wasn't a knife. Luckily, it was right outside my friend's house and a couple of them came running out when they heard the commotion. The guys fled immediately when 3 of my friends came sprinting toward them. I still look behind me when I walk home alone. When I was a kid, I was riding my bike home from a friend's house at sunset. I rode past the community pool, which had been closed for a couple months. There was a car in the lot with a guy in it. I didn't think much of it as I continued the trek home. I cut through the local elementary parking lot, which had gates. I get about 20 yards past the gate and see the car pull up at the bottom. Thinking that's odd. Anyhow, he backs out away from the gate. My spidey senses were kind of tingling at this point. I get to the school and head toward the teacher parking lot, which is my standard direction. As I'm about to turn the corner, I see headlights from the parking lot. I stop and peek around the corner, and that's the freaking guy again. Flip my bike around and start going the long way around the school. He sees me but just gets back in his car. Starts driving around the front of the school. I camp out in these bushes, heart pounding. He is slowly driving up and down the front of the school, keeping an eye on the teacher's lot. Another car comes down the street and he has to move his dumb car out of their way. As soon as he does this, I blast up to the street and full tilt flew my bike in some random open garage. So I'm hiding in the garage, waiting for him to come around again. But he doesn't. I give it a few minutes, then decide to pop my head out. Still, no one. Okay, I'm a few blocks from home, just gotta go for it. Bust out the bike and start hauling butt home. Not half a block later, this dude turns the corner on me. I just veer my bike into some random lawn and run to the front door. I look at him and he's just in the street staring at me. I grip the front door handle, praying to any and every god that these people didn't lock their door. I see his reverse lights flicker, and I know he's just about to put it in park. I just rip that door open, run inside, and slam it. 2 old people just sitting there. I look at them, and I'm like, some dude is trying to get me out there. They don't completely believe me because they barely react to what I said, but they didn't kick me out either. I'm watching the dude from their window, and he's just chilling. Then the grandpa-looking dude gets up from his lazy boy and opens the curtain to look for himself. When he does this, The crazy guy in the car just leaves. The old guy is like, well, looks like he's gonna leave. I'm like, I'm not leaving for a bit. So I hang out for 10 minutes and no creepy abductor car can be seen. I assume he figured I'd call the cops. Finally, I have to get home. This is before cell phones were common for average people. I hop on my bike and I swear it felt like I drove 35 miles an hour the entire way home. Get home and tell my parents. I'm exhausted and in complete shock. They basically brush me off. I'm stunned that every adult I interact with acted like I was crazy. I basically never talked about it again because it was so traumatic to talk about at the time. That image of him in his car while I held the door handle to the random house is permanently seared into my brain. To this day, it's still crystal clear as if it happened yesterday. It's been 20 years. I decided to confront my parents as to why they didn't do anything that day. They said, "What are you talking about?" I explained it far better than I could have when I was a kid in complete shock. Anyhow, with the current, more expansive explanation, my mother broke down. She started crying at this public restaurant because she saw how serious I was when I was like, how could you ignore what I said that day? As well as talked about how that morphed my stranger danger techniques for better or worse. Thankfully, I was on the verge of puberty and ended up becoming a giant human being, so my actual fears diminished quickly as I could defend myself. Until I moved away from that town, however, I looked every day for that damn car. Never saw it again. I would fantasize about what it would be like if I ever did find that guy again. I still do. I was around 20 or 21, walking home at 3 o'clock in the morning after a night out. I was absolutely plastered from drinking so much. About 200 meters from my home when a hooded figure jumped out from behind a bush and immediately had a knife pushing into my stomach as he grabbed my neck and tried pulling me in. Fortunately, I was stronger and pulled away. He went to lunge at me with a knife when he suddenly stopped. Stared for what felt like an eternity but was probably a second or two when I said, "Holy crap, I haven't seen you in so long." Then walked off like nothing had happened. I still don't know who he was to this day. I had a homicidal roommate. He would graphically describe his murderous fantasies in vivid detail to me. Very gory stuff like peeling faces off and slicing guts open. Over the course of my time knowing him, he would describe his victim in detail. Every element of his descriptions aligned perfectly to me, with unsettling detail. I would confront him about this numerous times, stating I felt unsafe, asking if he wanted to hurt me. He would always slide around the questions with his words, never saying anything reassuring or direct. These conversations always left me feeling more unsettled. One day he just walks into my room with a dazed look on his face, almost as if he were in a state of psychosis. Sits on the foot of my bed, not saying a word. I sat on a chair about 4 feet in front of him and asked him what's going on. I had a very disturbing feeling at this point. He quickly reaches into his pocket, pulls out an open blade knife and lunges at me. My first and only instinct was to lunge back at him. I grabbed him by the shirt, pressed my forehead to his, and screamed, "What the fuck are you doing?" Shaking him as hard as I could. His eyes went scared. He dropped the knife and just stumbled on his words, uttering, I don't know, as he walked out of my room. In hindsight, what I did was pretty dangerous. I should have decked him right in the face or something else. He was a puss when under confrontation, so I don't know if he could have actually stabbed me. It was scary, though. I reported this incident and past behaviors to the apartment management. He was evicted. The police got involved and searched his room. They found illegal weapons in his closet, whatever that means. This all happened many years ago. I was a lead man at a factory. A girl starts working there, and I take an interest. After a few months, I find out she's in a terrible, drug-fueled, abusive relationship. Every night I tell her to call me. I'll come get her. Finally, after months, she actually calls me. I come and get her and take her to my house. The guy she was in a relationship with didn't take too kindly to me taking her away. He spends the next 2 years harassing and threatening us. A few months after she and I got married, we went out for a few drinks. Her ex just happened to be at the bar we went to. He apologized to us for threats and harassment. We were sitting outside talking with a few other people. Next thing I know, I'm on my back on the ground with someone choking me. I try everything I can to get him off of me, but being blindsided and them being on top of me wasn't easy. As I struggle to get free, everything goes black, and then I see the light at the end of the tunnel. In that moment, I was certain that this was the end for me. I somehow managed to get a better hold of this person's head and I yanked them off me. We run to the car and get away. A week or so later, my wife had been talking to everyone she thinks might know what happened. Turns out, her ex had paid 2 people $50 to kill me that night. A couple of years ago, my brother and I went to walk the dog at 11 p.m. We left through the side gate. We live on a corner, and right as we exit, I see this weird-looking dude at the corner of the footpath, walking weirdly toward us. Got bad vibes. Told my brother to get the dog and get back inside. This dude is walking kind of side on and hiding something in his hand behind his back. As I'm getting my brother through the gate, the dude says something like, "Oi mate, can I come in? I need a blanket, I'm freezing." I just ignored him and went inside and locked the door. We then get a call from the people who live 2 doors up, and the same dude knocked on their door, and their 10-year-old son opened it to see the dude holding a friggin' hatchet. I'm so glad I went with my gut on that one. When you nearly escape death and relive it inside your mind, over and over again, telling your story is supposed to be therapeutic. The worst part of reliving that story is realizing that all of the scary stories, myths, legends, special effects, the scariest monsters of all, are people. See you next time.